So, you're still pretending this marriage is working? Michael's best friend Ryan's words cut across the elegant restaurant table as he swirled his whiskey in its crystal tumbler. I froze with my fork halfway to my mouth, the carefully plated sea bass suddenly looking as appealing as cardboard. I mean, how long are you going to keep funding his lifestyle with your family's money? Everyone knows he married you for the Taylor fortune. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My husband's eyes stayed glued to his phone, refusing to meet mine or defend me. 20 pairs of eyes shifted awkwardly between us at our anniversary dinner, a celebration I'd spent weeks planning, arranging for all our closest friends and family to surprise Michael at his favorite restaurant. I carefully placed my sterling silver fork beside the truffle risotto I'd specifically requested the chef prepare. Michael's favorite dish. The words hung in the air of the upscale Chicago restaurant that Ryan had no idea I actually owned through my investment company, long before I'd ever met Michael. I smoothed the napkin across my lap, using the moment to steady my trembling hands. "What an interesting perspective, Ryan," I replied, my voice calmer than the storm building inside me. "Perhaps we should discuss what each of us actually contributes to our friendships." Michael finally looked up, squeezing my knee under the table, a silent plea to let it go. Again. Always again. Ryan Thompson, with his carefully styled hair and custom-tailored suit that probably cost more than what most people spend on rent, narrowed his eyes at me from across the white linen tablecloth that separated us. He'd been Michael's friend since college, and had never approved of me. "I'm simply looking out for Michael's interests," he said, reaching for his whiskey. "In my experience, tech guys who suddenly hit it big tend to become targets for women with dollar signs in their eyes." My father-in-law, George, cleared his throat uncomfortably, but said nothing to contradict Ryan. The other guests at the table seemed to become intensely interested in their food or the restaurant's elegant ceiling architecture. The coward's approach to conflict. I felt the familiar heat rising in my chest, the one that appeared whenever Ryan unleashed his thinly veiled insults about my background, my profession, or my existence in Michael's life. 4 years of marriage, and he still viewed me as an interloper, a gold digger who had somehow tricked his brilliant software engineer friend into marriage. "How's everyone enjoying their meals?" Michael asked, his voice pitched slightly higher than normal. Emma selected the menu herself. His attempt at diversion was as transparent as Ryan's contempt. "Delicious," George muttered, the first word he'd contributed to the conversation in 20 minutes. "Absolutely perfect," Lisa, Michael's sister, added with obvious forced enthusiasm. "You'll have to tell me how you convinced Chef Antoine to prepare this menu, Emma." Ryan wasn't so easily deterred. "Where exactly did you grow up again, Emma? Some suburb inn?" He left the question hanging, casually sipping his drink while his eyes never left mine. "Lakewood," I supplied, reaching for my water glass to cool my burning throat. "About 40 minutes south of downtown." I didn't add that Lakewood had been transformed by tech money over the last decade, or that my father had worked 80-hour weeks building his software security company until his health failed, leaving me to take over at 25. I didn't mention the nights I'd spent studying computer science and business, earning dual degrees while apprenticing under my father, learning every aspect of Taylor Security Solutions from the ground up. Ryan didn't deserve those parts of me. "Right, Lakewood," he said, as if recalling something distasteful. "And your parents were in real estate, wasn't it?" "My mother managed properties," I confirmed. "My father founded Taylor Security Solutions." I held his gaze steadily, refusing to be shamed for a hard-working heritage that had taught me more about resilience than Ryan's trust fund upbringing ever could. "How quaint," he murmured, the word transformed into an insult in his mouth. "And now you run that little graphic design business as a hobby." He made it sound like I collected porcelain figurines or talked to imaginary friends. Emma runs her own digital security consulting firm, Michael interjected, a rare moment of backbone emerging. She specializes in protecting high net worth clients and securing their digital assets. She's currently overseeing the security system for the new downtown financial center. A 7-figure contract, I added quietly, sipping my wine. My third this year. Ryan's smile tightened. How fortunate that you have Michael's connections to pursue such creative endeavors. At that moment, the maitre d' appeared at our table. Mr. Wilson, there's an urgent call for you at the front desk. They say it cannot wait. Michael's expression flickered with something I couldn't quite identify. Nervousness? Anticipation? He glanced at his watch, then back at his phone. If you'll excuse me, he said, standing quickly and straightening his jacket. I need to take this. Won't be long. As he walked away, I remembered the day we first met, 5 years ago. I was giving a presentation at a tech security conference, and Michael had approached me afterward with genuine questions about my encryption protocol. Not hitting on me, not networking, just pure intellectual curiosity. His brilliant mind had captivated me from the start. Ryan leaned over as soon as Michael was out of earshot. You realize he's only with you for the lifestyle upgrade, right? He was living in a studio apartment when you met him. I looked at Ryan directly, feeling a strange calm descend over me. You seem very concerned about Michael's living arrangements. Is there a reason for your particular interest in my husband? Ryan flushed red, whether from anger or embarrassment I couldn't tell. We've been friends for 15 years. I know him better than anyone. And yet, here I am, the one he married, I replied evenly. 30 minutes passed. Michael didn't return. The dessert, a special anniversary cake I'd arranged, remained in the kitchen, waiting for a celebration that seemed increasingly unlikely to happen. Our guests grew restless, conversations becoming awkward as Michael's absence stretched, from noticeable to inexplicable. Should someone check on him? Lisa finally suggested, looking concerned. I'm sure he's fine, Ryan said quickly, too quickly. Probably just handling a work emergency. A feeling of dread settled in my stomach as I pulled out my phone. Michael and I shared our locations with each other, a security measure I'd implemented after a client of mine had received threats that extended to their family. I opened the app, expecting to see Michael still at the restaurant. Instead, his location showed him 15 minutes away, at the Lakeside Hotel. For a moment, I couldn't process what I was seeing. Why would he leave our anniversary dinner without a word? What emergency would take him to a hotel? I thought about the past few months, the late nights at work, the decreased intimacy, the way he guarded his phone. I'd attributed it to the stress of his new project launch. Now, a different picture was forming, one I didn't want to see. As if sensing my distress, Sarah, my best friend since college, leaned over. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. What's wrong? I showed her my phone screen silently. Her eyes widened. Maybe it's a work thing, she whispered, but her tone lacked conviction. I need to go, I said, standing abruptly. The conversations around the table halted. Please, enjoy the rest of the evening. The bill is taken care of. Emma, wait, Sarah started, but I was already moving, grabbing my purse and heading for the door. Outside, the Chicago night air hit my face, cool against my flushed skin. My driver, James, was waiting with the car as arranged. The Lakeside Hotel, I instructed, sliding into the back seat. As quickly as possible, please. As we drove, I fought against the rising tide of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. The signs had been there. Michael's emotional distance, unexplained. Absences, secretive phone behavior, classic indicators I'd chosen to ignore because I'd believed in us, in what we'd built together. We had met at that tech conference when his small software company was just beginning to take off. He didn't know about my family's wealth then. Didn't know that Taylor Security Solutions had grown from my father's small startup into a major player in digital security. He'd seen me as Emma Taylor, security expert, not Emma Taylor, heiress to the Taylor fortune. That's what had made our connection seem so genuine. He'd pursued me for my mind, my expertise. At least that's what I'd believed. We'd dated for 6 months before I'd taken him to my family's lake house, before he'd begun to understand the extent of my financial situation. By then, I'd thought our foundation was solid. Now, pulling up to the luxury hotel where my husband had apparently fled during our anniversary dinner, I wondered if I'd been naive all along. "Would you like me to wait, Ms. Taylor?" James asked as we arrived. "Yes, please," I replied, my professional mask firmly in place despite the chaos inside me. The lakeside hotel lobby gleamed with marble and crystal, the kind of understated luxury that whispered rather than shouted wealth. I approached the front desk, my heart pounding so loudly I was certain the impeccably dressed receptionist could hear it. "Good evening," I said, summoning the confidence I used in board meetings. "I'm looking for my husband, Michael Wilson. He mentioned meeting someone here for an urgent matter." The young woman's eyes flickered with recognition, whether of my name or my face, I couldn't tell. Chicago's business community was relatively small at the upper levels. "Mr. Wilson arrived about 20 minutes ago," she confirmed, checking her computer. "He went up to the Lakeview Suite on the 37th floor. The Lakeview Suite, one of the hotel's most expensive accommodations, with panoramic views of Lake Michigan. Not exactly a place for an impromptu business meeting." "Thank you," I said, moving toward the elevators before she could ask any questions. As the elevator climbed, I tried to prepare myself for what I might find. There could be an explanation, perhaps a surprise client, a confidential meeting, a misunderstanding. But the knot in my stomach tightened with each passing floor, intuition drowning out rationalization. The 37th floor was silent, plush carpeting muffling my footsteps as I moved down the hallway toward the Lakeview Suite. Outside the door, I paused. There were voices inside, Michael's distinctive tenor and a woman's laugh, light and intimate. I could walk away. Pretend I hadn't seen his location, hadn't come here, hadn't heard that laugh. Return to the restaurant and our guests, maintain the facade for one more night. It would be easier, less messy. But I'd built my business on facing hard truths, on seeing problems clearly before they became catastrophes. I couldn't unsee what was unfolding, couldn't unhear that laugh or ignore what it meant. I knocked firmly. The voices ceased immediately. Footsteps approached, and then the door opened to reveal Michael, his tie loosened, top buttons undone, hair slightly mussed. His expression cycled rapidly from expectation to shock to guilt as he registered my presence. "Emma," he managed, his voice strangled. How did you—" "Location sharing," I said simply, the two words carrying the weight of broken trust. "May I come in?" He hesitated, blocking the doorway. "This isn't what it looks like." "Then what is it, Michael?" I kept my voice steady, surprising myself. "Because it looks like you left our anniversary dinner, with all our friends and family, to meet someone at a luxury hotel suite." Before he could answer, a woman appeared behind him, tall and elegant in a form-fitting dress, her dark hair cascading over bare shoulders. I recognized her instantly, Olivia Reeves, the VP of Marketing at Next Gen Tech, one of Michael's biggest clients. "Oh," she said, her confident expression faltering slightly. "You must be Emma. And you must be the urgent call that couldn't—" "Wait," I replied, the pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. Michael moved aside, resignation replacing the panic in his eyes. "Emma, please, let me explain." I stepped into the suite, taking in the champagne bucket, the scattered clothing, the rumpled bedding visible through the bedroom doorway. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. "How long?" I asked, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. Michael and Olivia exchanged glances. 3 months, he admitted, unable to meet my eyes. 3 months. The timeline aligned perfectly with his emotional withdrawal, with the change in our relationship I'd attributed to work stress. The project launch he'd been so consumed by, NextGen's new platform, suddenly took on a different meaning. I see, I said, the full impact still hovering at the edges of my consciousness, not quite landing. And our anniversary dinner? Was that just inconveniently scheduled? Michael had the decency to look ashamed. I was going to tell you, just not like this, not tonight. When then? I asked. After dessert? Tomorrow morning? Next week? Olivia shifted uncomfortably. I should go. No, stay, I said, turning to her. You're clearly an important part of Michael's life now. You should be included in this conversation. She blanched at my tone, which remained eerily composed. My phone vibrated in my purse. I pulled it out to see a notification from our joint. Credit card, a purchase at the Lakeside Hotel for $1,200. The room charge for the Lakeview Suite, made on our shared account. I held up the phone, showing Michael the notification. You charged your affair to our joint account, I said, a bitter laugh escaping me. That's impressively careless. He paled, reaching for his own phone. I didn't mean to use that. Card. Clearly, I replied, a strange detachment settling over me, as if I were watching this scene from outside my body. You know, Michael, for a tech genius, you've made some remarkably basic errors. Location sharing, shared credit alerts, almost as if you wanted to get caught. The possibility hung in the air between us. Had he wanted an exit strategy? Was this elaborate betrayal actually a way to end our marriage without having to be the one to say the words? It wasn't like that, he protested weakly. It just happened. Olivia and I were working late on the NextGen project and things evolved. Things evolved, I repeated, the calm in my voice finally cracking. 4 years of marriage, and things evolved with someone else because you were working late? Olivia stepped forward, her professional poise reasserting itself. Emma, this is between you and Michael. I should leave you to discuss this privately. You lost the right to privacy when you slept with my husband, I said, my voice now ice cold. But you're right about one thing. This is ultimately between Michael and me. I turned back to my husband, the man I'd built a life with, the person I'd trusted most in the world. I'm going home now. When you decide to return, if you decide to return, we can discuss what happens next. Michael reached for me. Emma, please. We can work through this. I stepped back, avoiding his touch. Can we? Do you want to? His hesitation was answer enough. That's what I thought, I said softly. Enjoy your evening. I've already paid. For it, apparently. I walked out of the suite, down the hall, and into the waiting elevator. Only when the doors closed did I allow the first tear to fall, quickly wiped away as I straightened my shoulders. I was Emma Taylor, daughter of David Taylor, CEO of Taylor Security Solutions, and architect of my own destiny. This betrayal, however devastating, would not define me. In the car, I instructed James to take me home rather than back to the restaurant. I couldn't face our friends and family, couldn't maintain the facade for another minute. As we drove through Chicago's glittering downtown, I stared at the city lights reflecting on the lake, their beauty unchanged despite my world shattering. My phone buzzed with texts from concerned guests, Sarah, Lisa, even Ryan. I ignored them all, needing space to process what had happened, to decide what came next. The truth was, despite Michael's betrayal, I wasn't entirely surprised. There had been a distance growing between us for longer than the affair, a fundamental disconnect I'd been reluctant to acknowledge. While I'd been focused on growing, my division of the family business, securing our financial future, Michael had been chasing the validation of people like Ryan, trying to prove himself in a world that measured worth by who you knew and what you owned. We arrived at our penthouse apartment, purchased with my money but always referred to as our place, or sometimes even Michael's place by his friends. Another small deception I'd allowed, another compromise made to protect his ego. Inside, the spacious rooms felt hollow, the carefully selected furniture and art that we'd chosen together now seeming like props in a staged production rather than elements of a home. I moved through the space, running my fingers along surfaces, seeing everything with new clarity. My office door stood slightly ajar, unusual as I always kept it closed and locked when not in use, a security habit ingrained from years of handling sensitive information. I pushed it open, immediately noticing that my computer had been accessed. The monitor glowed softly in the darkened room, displaying my email dashboard. I walked over, checking the login history. Someone had accessed my account at 6:42 p.m., right before we left for the restaurant. Michael had said he was getting changed, but apparently he'd been busy with something else entirely. The most recently opened email was from my lawyer, discussing the updated terms of my inheritance. My father had officially transferred control of Taylor Security Solutions to me last week, along with the majority of company shares. The email detailed the new structure, the assets now under my direct control, and the significant increase in my personal net worth. The timing suddenly made horrifying sense. Michael's betrayal tonight wasn't just an affair reaching its inevitable exposure. It was deliberately orchestrated after learning about my new financial status. But why expose the affair now, when he stood to gain so much more by maintaining our marriage? Unless... I checked the sent folder and found my answer. An email to our joint financial advisor, apparently from me, requesting information about how my assets would be divided in case of divorce, specifically asking about my rights to protect my inheritance and company shares. Michael hadn't just been snooping, he'd been actively laying groundwork, creating evidence that I was considering divorce first, potentially strengthening his position for when he decided to leave. The timestamp showed it was sent just hours ago, right before our anniversary dinner. The calculated nature of the betrayal struck harder than the affair itself. This wasn't just infidelity, it was strategic. He'd been planning this, timing it to maximize his potential claim on my assets. I sat down heavily in my desk chair, the full weight of the situation finally hitting me. The man I loved, the man I thought I knew, had not only cheated, but had been meticulously setting the stage to benefit financially from our eventual divorce. A notification pinged on my phone, another charge on the joint credit card, this time for room service at the Lakeside Hotel. Champagne and dessert for two. They were celebrating. While I sat alone in the ruins of my marriage, they were celebrating, with champagne charged to my account. Something shifted inside me then, the shock and hurt crystallizing into a cold, clear resolve. If Michael wanted to play games with the Taylor fortune, he was about to learn that he was severely outmatched. I hadn't become the youngest CEO in our company's history by being easily manipulated or outmaneuvered. I picked up my phone and made 2 calls, first to my personal attorney, then to our head of digital security. By morning, I would have a complete picture of Michael's activities, access, and vulnerabilities. By tomorrow night, I would have a strategy. Michael had made a critical error. He'd assumed that because I had loved him, I would be blinded by emotion, easy to manipulate. He'd forgotten, or perhaps never truly understood, that beneath the loving wife was a businesswoman who had been trained from childhood to protect what was hers. As I prepared for bed in our guest room, unwilling to sleep in the bed we had shared, I thought about Ryan's comment at dinner. Everyone knows he married you for the Taylor fortune. Had everyone known except me? Had I been playing a part in someone else's drama all along, believing it was my own love story? The thought brought fresh pain, but also clarity. If my marriage had been an illusion, at least I now saw the truth. And in business, as my father had always taught me, seeing the truth clearly was the first step to gaining the advantage. Tomorrow, Michael would discover exactly who he had betrayed. Not just Emma Wilson, his adoring wife, but Emma Taylor, heir to the Taylor security empire, and a woman who did not take betrayal lightly. As I drifted into an uneasy sleep, one thought provided cold comfort. Michael might have won tonight's battle with his hotel rendezvous, but he had severely underestimated who he was at war with. And that mistake would cost him everything. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay in the guest room, staring at the ceiling as memories flooded through me, not just of tonight's betrayal, but of the past 5 years with Michael. I remembered the day we met at the Chicago Tech Security Conference. I was presenting my latest encryption protocol, something I'd developed after 3 years of research. The auditorium was packed with industry professionals, and I'd felt that familiar rush of confidence as I explained the technical specifications, fielding questions with ease. My father had always said I was born for this, not just understanding security systems, but explaining them in ways that made people listen. When the presentation ended, most attendees drifted toward the networking reception. But a tall man with intelligent eyes and a slightly rumpled suit remained, reviewing my slides with obvious interest. "The asymmetric key distribution is brilliant," he said, looking up as I approached. "But have you considered the implications for quantum computing vulnerabilities?" Not a pickup line, not empty flattery, a genuine technical question that showed he'd not only understood my presentation, but had thought beyond it. That was my first impression of Michael Wilson, a mind that matched mine, someone who saw the substance of my work rather than the Taylor name or family connections. "I'm Michael," he'd said, extending his hand. "I run a small software development company focusing on security applications." "Emma Taylor," I'd replied, finding myself unusually eager to continue the conversation. "Taylor?" His brow had furrowed slightly. "Any relation to Taylor Security Solutions?" "My father's company," I'd admitted, waiting for the familiar shift, the moment when professional interest transformed into networking calculation. But Michael had simply nodded. "I've studied your father's early encryption protocols. Groundbreaking. Work? Is that what inspired you to pursue security systems?" That evening, we'd talked for hours in the hotel bar, dissecting security protocols, debating the ethics of backdoor access, and sharing stories of coding all-nighters. Not once did he mention my family's wealth or try to leverage our conversation into a business opportunity. He seemed interested in me, my ideas, my expertise, my passion for the work. Looking back now, I wondered if it had all been an elaborate performance. Had he known exactly who I was from the beginning? Had the apparent coincidence of our meeting been orchestrated? The tech world was small enough that someone ambitious could have planned such an encounter. I sat up in bed, suddenly alert. Michael's company had been struggling when we met. He'd been open about that. His innovative security software had potential but needed capital and connections to scale. I'd attributed his interest in me to intellectual compatibility, but what if it had been strategic from the very start? My phone buzzed, interrupting the painful spiral of questions. A text from David Chen, our head of digital security, whom I'd called earlier. Initial scan complete. Found keylogger on home system. Call me when you can. A keylogger. Software that records every keystroke, capturing passwords, emails, everything. Not something that accidentally appears on a system, especially not on the home network of a security expert. This was deliberate, invasive surveillance. I glanced at the time, 3:17 a.m. Michael hadn't returned. Another notification from our joint credit card showed room charges extending through the night. The betrayal was continuing, unfolding in real time while I pieced together its history. Despite the hour, I called David. "When was it installed?" I asked without preamble when he answered. 3 months ago. David replied, his voice professional despite the hour. Sophisticated implementation, but we've isolated it. There's more, Emma. Someone's been accessing your personal drive remotely, copying financial documents, contracts, company strategy materials. 3 months, the same timeline as the affair with Olivia. This wasn't just infidelity, it was corporate espionage. Can you trace the destination of the copied files? Working on it, but preliminary tracking shows they were sent to an encrypted cloud storage service. We're trying to crack access now. Lock everything down, I instructed. Revoke all of Michael's credentials, secure all Taylor security systems and personal accounts. I want a complete security audit by morning. After ending the call, I stood by the window overlooking Chicago's skyline, the city's lights blurring through tears I refused to let fall. The betrayal was expanding beyond personal heartbreak into something more calculated and far-reaching. This wasn't just about our marriage, it was about my company, my family's legacy. I thought about my father, who had built Taylor Security from nothing after immigrating to America with little more than determination and a brilliant mind for systems. He'd taught me everything, not just about encryption and network security, but about trusting my instincts, about the responsibility that came with protecting valuable information. The most dangerous threats don't announce themselves, Emma, he'd told me repeatedly. They come disguised as something you want to believe. How prophetic those words seemed now. By dawn, I'd formulated a plan. I showered, dressed in my most confidence-inspiring outfit, a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, subtle makeup, hair swept into a sleek chignon, and prepared to face the day not as Michael's betrayed wife, but as Emma Taylor, CEO of Taylor Security Solutions. My first stop was Taylor headquarters downtown, arriving before 7 a.m. to meet with my executive team. I needed to contain potential damage before Michael realized his access had been revoked. We have a potential security breach involving sensitive company information, I informed them, keeping my explanation professional and devoid of personal drama. We're implementing Protocol 7 effective immediately. Protocol 7 was our most comprehensive security response, designed for situations involving insider threats. It involved compartmentalizing information, implementing additional authentication measures, and preparing for potential legal action. My team's expressions showed appropriate concern but no surprise. In our business, security threats were an ever-present reality. Only Jessica Reeves, our chief legal officer and my longtime friend, lingered after the others filed out to execute their assigned tasks. Emma, she said quietly, closing the door. What's really happening? This isn't just a routine security response. I hesitated, the professional mask I'd maintained threatening to crack. Jessica had been my friend since college, had been maid of honor at my wedding. If anyone deserved the complete truth, it was her. Michael's been having an affair, I said, the words still painful to speak aloud, while also installing surveillance software on our home network and copying company documents. Jessica's expression shifted from concern to controlled fury. For how long? The affair? 3 months with Olivia Reeves from NextGen? The corporate espionage? We're still determining the extent. Olivia Reeves, Jessica repeated, recognition dawning. NextGen just acquired that security startup, CloudLock Systems, the one developing competing technology to your father's legacy protocols. The connection hit me with sickening clarity. NextGen was positioning itself as a major player in digital security, directly competing with Taylor Security in several key markets. Olivia wasn't just any executive. She was part of their strategic acquisition team. This could be more than personal betrayal, Jessica continued, her legal mind rapidly processing implications. This could be coordinated corporate espionage. We need to move quickly, secure evidence before it disappears. For the next several hours, we worked with methodical precision, documenting the breach, securing systems, and preparing for potential legal scenarios. By noon, we had confirmed that sensitive Taylor Security intellectual property had been compromised, with files specifically related to our newest encryption protocol accessed and copied. My phone remained silent. No calls or texts from Michael. No explanation or apology. His silence spoke volumes. Either he was still with Olivia, or he knew his larger scheme had been discovered and was strategizing his next move. At 1:30 p.m., as I reviewed security logs with David, my assistant interrupted with urgent news. "Mr. Wilson just arrived in the lobby, demanding to see you. Security is holding him as per Protocol 7 instructions." I exchanged glances with David and Jessica. "Bring him to conference room 3, I instructed. "Make sure security remains present and record everything." Conference room 3 was our most secure meeting space, soundproofed, with sophisticated monitoring systems and no external network access. It was where we conducted our most sensitive client meetings, where government officials discussed classified security implementations with our team. Today, it would be where I confronted my husband about his betrayal, both personal and professional. I arrived before Michael was escorted in, seating myself at the head of the table with Jessica beside me, several folders of evidence arranged precisely before us. When the door opened and Michael entered, flanked by 2 security officers, was struck by his appearance, disheveled, eyes bloodshot, his usual confidence replaced by agitation. "Emma, what the hell is going on?" he demanded, stopping short at the sight of Jessica and the formal setting. "My keycard doesn't work. I can't access any systems, and your security treated me like a criminal." "Please sit down, Mr. Wilson," Jessica said, her tone professionally detached. "Mr. Wilson?" Michael looked between us, incredulity replacing anger. "Emma? Seriously? After one fight, you're having your legal team refer to me by my last name? This is ridiculous." I maintained my composure, meeting his gaze directly. "This isn't about last night's fight, as you characterize your affair with Olivia Reeves. This is about the key logger installed on our home network 3 months ago. This is about the systematic copying of proprietary Taylor security information that coincided with your relationship with a next-gen executive." Michael's expression flickered, surprise quickly masked by indignation. "What are you talking about? I never installed any spyware. Is this how you're planning to spin things? Create some corporate espionage fantasy to distract from the fact that our marriage has been failing for months?" "Our systems documented the breach," I replied evenly, sliding a folder toward him, "as well as the destination of the copied files. What's interesting is that while the transmission was encrypted, our team managed to trace the receiving account." I opened the folder, revealing printouts of technical logs and account information. The files were sent to a secure cloud storage account registered to Next Gen Technologies, specifically to their acquisition division, Olivia's department. Michael's facade cracked momentarily, genuine alarm crossing his features before he collected himself. "This is absurd. I'm a software engineer, Emma. I collaborate with dozens of companies, including NextGen. Any file sharing would have been legitimate business. Including our new quantum-resistant encryption protocol, the one that hasn't been publicly announced yet?" I pushed another document toward him, a list of accessed files with timestamps. "These weren't collaborative projects, Michael. These were proprietary technologies and strategic plans that give Taylor Security its competitive edge." He stared at the document, then attempted a different approach. "Look, there's clearly been a misunderstanding. I've been stressed. I made a terrible mistake with Olivia, but I would never betray you professionally. Let's discuss this privately without your legal team present." The shift was so transparent, the attempt to isolate me, to leverage our personal relationship to avoid professional consequences. Once, it might have worked. The Michael I thought I knew could have convinced me to give him the benefit of the doubt, to believe in his fundamental goodness despite evidence to the contrary, but that Michael had never existed. "This meeting is being recorded," I informed him, as is standard procedure for potential security breaches. Taylor Security Solutions has already filed for emergency injunctions against next-gen technologies and is preparing criminal complaints for corporate espionage and theft of intellectual property. Michael's expression hardened, the pretense of innocence abandoned. "You won't be able to prove anything, and even if you could, do you really want this public? Emma Taylor, security expert, couldn't even secure her own home network from her husband? The industry will love that irony." The threat was clear. If I pursued this, he would attempt to damage my professional reputation, to paint me as incompetent despite my credentials and accomplishments. "Actually," Jessica interjected smoothly, "Ms. Taylor implemented a secondary shadow system 6 months ago as part of standard security protocol rotation. It documented all access and transmission of company materials, creating an unalterable evidence trail. The logs are already with federal investigators who specialize in corporate espionage cases. This was a calculated bluff. We had evidence of the breach but hadn't yet involved federal authorities." Jessica was leveraging Michael's technical knowledge against him, knowing he would understand the implications of a shadow security system. The strategy worked. Michael paled visibly, his confidence faltering. "This is insane. We're married. You're really going to send me to prison because I made one mistake?" "One mistake?" I repeated, finally allowing some of my anger to surface. "You systematically betrayed me for months, personally and professionally. You leveraged our marriage to steal from my family's company. You accessed my inheritance information and sent emails in my name about divorce proceedings to set yourself up for a beneficial settlement." I leaned forward, meeting his gaze directly. "And last night, while celebrating your betrayal with Olivia on our anniversary, you charged it to our joint account, an account funded primarily by my family's money, which you've been so resentful of yet so willing to spend." Something shifted in his expression then. The calculation replaced by genuine emotion, though whether it was regret or simply fear of consequences, I couldn't tell. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," he said quietly. "It started small, just gathering competitive intelligence, understanding Taylor's market position. NextGen offered consultancy fees, entirely legal. Then things escalated. They wanted more, specific information, proprietary details. And Olivia was your handler," I concluded, the pieces falling into place. "The affair was part of their strategy." Michael hesitated, then nodded slowly. "At first, but it became complicated. Real feelings developed." The admission struck deeper than it should have, piercing what remained of my heart. Not only had he betrayed me, but he had actually developed genuine feelings for the woman who'd been assigned to extract information from him. The humiliation was complete. "Your personal relationships are no longer my concern," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Your legal situation, however, is considerable. Corporate espionage carries significant criminal penalties, apart from civil liabilities." "What do you want, Emma?" he asked, defeat evident in his posture. "Just tell me what you want." It was the question I'd been considering since the early hours of the morning. What did I want? Revenge? Justice? Protection for my company? All of the above? I want a complete confession detailing NextGen's involvement, including Olivia's role, I stated. I want all copied materials returned and verified destroyed. I want a divorce with no claims against my personal or business assets. And I want your resignation from any positions that might compete with Taylor Security for a period of 5 years. You're asking me to surrender my entire career, Michael protested. I'm offering you an alternative to federal prosecution, Jessica corrected. Ms. Taylor is being extraordinarily generous considering the circumstances. Michael looked between us, the full gravity of his situation finally registering. He'd gambled everything, our marriage, his professional reputation, his freedom, and lost comprehensively. "I need time to consider my options," he said finally. "You have 24 hours, I replied, standing to indicate the meeting was concluded. After that, we proceed with criminal charges. As security escorted him from the building, I remained in the conference room, the professional composure I'd maintained threatening to crumble now that he was gone. Jessica placed a hand on my shoulder. "You did brilliantly, Emma. He never saw this coming." "Neither did I replied quietly. After Jessica left to prepare the legal documents for Michael's potential confession, I allowed myself 10 minutes of private grief, not for the loss of the man I'd thought I married, but for the death of the future I'd imagined. The children we'd discussed having someday, the growing old together, the partnership of minds and hearts I'd believed we shared. Then I dried my eyes, reapplied my lipstick, and returned to my office to continue managing the crisis. By late afternoon, damage assessment was well underway. Our security team had contained the breach, and preliminary analysis suggested that, while significant intellectual property had been compromised, our core systems remained secure. The newest encryption protocol, my personal project and the company's most valuable asset, had been accessed but not completely copied, thanks to security partitioning I'd implemented last month. At 5:43 p.m., my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. "We should talk. Coffee at Kingston's, 7 p.m. Oh. Olivia." Reaching out directly, bypassing Michael. The audacity was almost admirable. After consulting with Jessica, I decided to accept the invitation. Understanding NextGen's strategy directly from Olivia might provide valuable intelligence for our legal position. Kingston's was a small cafe near the financial district, public. Enough to be safe, but quiet enough for a private conversation. I arrived precisely at 7, spotting Olivia immediately in a corner booth. She'd changed from last night's form-fitting dress to a conservative business suit, her dark hair pulled back, severely. The transformation from seductress to executive was remarkable. "Thank you for coming," she said as I slid into the booth opposite her. "I wasn't sure you would." "Professional curiosity," I replied coolly. "It's not every day one gets to meet the architect of both personal and corporate betrayal in the same person." Olivia winced slightly at my directness. "I deserve that, but this situation is more complicated than you realize." "Enlighten me," I said, declining the waitress's offer of coffee with a shake of my head. "I wouldn't be staying long." "NextGen didn't target Michael because of your marriage," Olivia began, lowering her voice. "We targeted him before you even met. His early work on adaptive security protocols showed extraordinary promise. We've been cultivating him as an asset for years." I kept my expression neutral despite my surprise. "You're saying your relationship with my husband predates our marriage?" "Not my personal relationship," she clarified. "But NextGen's interest in him?" "Yes, absolutely. We first approached him 4 years ago, offering funding for his research in exchange for limited consulting work. The arrangement was completely legitimate initially. 4 years ago, a year before I met Michael. The timeline forced me to reconsider my understanding of events. If NextGen had already identified Michael as a potential asset before our relationship began, could our meeting at the tech conference have been engineered not by Michael, but by NextGen? "When did the nature of the arrangement change?" I asked, maintaining my professional demeanor despite the increasingly personal implications. Olivia sighed, a genuine weariness evident in her expression. "About a year ago. Michael's work was showing diminishing returns for us. There were concerns about continued funding. Then someone in intelligence noted his connection to you, and, by extension, to Taylor Security. The potential value of that connection was significant. So you were assigned to leverage it," I concluded, the corporate strategy becoming clearer. "Seduce the husband, gain access to competitor information. It wasn't that crude, Olivia protested, though her objection lacked conviction. I was asked to deepen our professional relationship with Michael, to explore potential synergies between his work and ours. And sleeping with him was just good customer service? The bitterness in my voice surprised me. I'd intended to remain detached, analytical. Olivia had the grace to look uncomfortable. It crossed professional lines, obviously, but Michael was receptive, eager, even. He talked constantly about feeling overshadowed by you, by the Taylor name and resources. He wanted recognition for his own work, separate from your family's influence. The revelation stung, confirming suspicions I'd tried to dismiss throughout our marriage. Michael's occasional resentment of my family's success, the subtle competitiveness when my projects received recognition, his insistence on maintaining his company separate from Taylor, security despite obvious synergies, all signs I'd attributed to normal professional pride rather than deeper insecurity. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked directly. Surely NextGen wouldn't approve of this conversation. Olivia glanced around before leaning closer. "Because things have escalated beyond corporate competition. This morning, after you confronted Michael, he contacted certain executives at NextGen with concerning proposals." "What kind of proposals?" "The kind that go beyond industrial espionage into territory that could trigger federal investigations," she replied carefully. "He's desperate, Emma. He knows his position is untenable, and he's looking for leverage." A chill ran through me. "He's threatening to expose NextGen's role in corporate espionage. Unless they provide significant financial support and legal protection," Olivia confirmed. "But more concerning is what he's offering in exchange." "Which is?" "Access to Taylor Security's Government Contracts Division. Specifically, the classified work your company does for federal agencies." The implications were staggering. Taylor Security's government work involved national security systems, classified infrastructure protection, areas where a breach could have implications far beyond corporate competition. "Why are you really here, Olivia?" I asked, studying her with newfound suspicion. "Warning me about Michael's desperation seems contrary to your company's interests." She met my gaze directly. "Because I'm leaving NextGen. My resignation letter was submitted this morning. What began as a corporate intelligence operation crossed ethical lines I'm not comfortable with, and..." She hesitated, seeming to consider her next words carefully. "And I actually developed genuine feelings for Michael, which compromised my professional judgment. But when I realized the extent of his deception, not just of you, but of me, I couldn't continue. He wasn't just feeding NextGen information about Taylor Security. He was feeding me carefully curated information about NextGen to position himself advantageously between both companies. The picture becoming clearer, Michael playing both sides, leveraging his connections with Taylor Security and NextGen to maximize his personal advantage, regardless of the collateral damage to either company or the people involved. He never loved either of us," Olivia concluded quietly. "We were just access points to what he really wanted: recognition, power, financial security." I absorbed this final betrayal, finding myself oddly calm. Perhaps there was a limit to how much pain one betrayal could inflict. After a certain point, additional revelations merely confirmed what you already knew rather than causing fresh wounds. "What do you suggest we do with this information?" I asked. "I'm prepared to provide a complete statement about NextGen's corporate espionage activities, including my role and Michael's," Olivia replied. "In exchange, I ask only that any legal action distinguish between corporate-directed activities and my personal involvement." It was a reasonable request and potentially valuable for Taylor Security's position. Olivia's testimony would strengthen our case considerably, particularly if Michael attempted to deny his involvement. "I'll have our legal team contact you tomorrow," I said, rising from the booth. And Olivia? Whatever genuine feelings you developed, save them for someone who deserves them. Michael Wilson isn't that person. As I walked away, Olivia called, "After me." "Emma, I'm sorry. For everything." I didn't turn back. Her apology might have been sincere, but it changed nothing. The damage was done, to my marriage, to my company, to my trust in my own judgment. Whatever satisfaction I might derive from Next Gen's eventual legal troubles or Michael's downfall couldn't restore what had been broken. Driving home through Chicago's evening traffic, I found myself thinking about my father's advice when I first took over significant responsibilities at Taylor Security. The true test isn't preventing every attack. It's how quickly and effectively you respond when one succeeds. Recovery defines resilience more than prevention. At the time, he'd been talking about network security breaches, but the wisdom applied equally to personal betrayals. I couldn't have prevented Michael's deception. It had begun before we even met, rooted in his own insecurities and ambitions. But I could control my response, my recovery, my path forward. As I entered our penthouse, my penthouse, I was struck by how different it looked in the harsh light of truth. The furniture we'd selected together, the art we'd collected during travels, the photographs of our life as a couple, all of it suddenly seemed part of an elaborate stage set rather than a home. I moved through the space methodically, gathering Michael's personal items, clothes, toiletries, the technical books he kept by his side of the bed. I packed everything carefully in suitcases, not out of consideration for him, but to hasten his complete removal from my life. The wedding photos went into a box, along with cards, love letters, and mementos from our relationship. Not destroyed, just removed, artifacts of a past that no longer defined my present. By midnight, all visible traces of Michael had been packed. Away, the penthouse transformed from our shared space to mine alone. I changed the security codes, reset the home automation system, and removed his access from all building security protocols. As I finally prepared for bed, exhausted yet oddly energized by the day's decisive actions, my phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "We need to talk. This has gone too far. I never meant to hurt you." I stared at the message, recognizing the manipulative tactic for what it was. Michael wasn't sorry he'd hurt me. He was sorry he'd been caught, sorry his carefully constructed plans had collapsed spectacularly. I typed a simple response. "Your belongings are packed. Security will allow you 1 hour to collect them tomorrow at noon. After that, any communication should go through my attorneys." Then I blocked his number, turned off my phone, and slept more peacefully than I had in months. The deep, restful sleep that comes with clarity, with decisive action, with the knowledge that whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, I would face them as Emma Taylor, not as an extension of a man who had betrayed everything I valued. The deception was over. The recovery had begun. The morning after my confrontation with Michael at Taylor Security headquarters brought a strange calm. I woke before my alarm, feeling oddly refreshed despite everything. The uncertainty that had plagued me for months was gone, replaced by clarity and purpose. As painful as the truth had been, it was infinitely preferable to the slow poison of deception. I dressed carefully for the day ahead, a deep blue suit that my father once told me conveyed both authority and trustworthiness. Today would require both qualities in abundance. The Taylor Security Board had called an emergency meeting in response to the potential breach, and I needed to project absolute confidence despite the personal humiliation underlying the corporate crisis. Jessica called as I was finishing my coffee. "Michael's attorney reached out," she said without preamble. "They want to discuss settlement terms." "Already?" I checked my watch. It wasn't yet 8 a.m. That was faster than expected. Apparently, Olivia provided a sworn statement to Next Gen's legal team last night, detailing the entire operation. Michael's position is precarious. I absorbed this information, thinking about my conversation with Olivia the previous evening. She had moved quickly, perhaps recognizing that whoever established the narrative first would have significant advantage. "What are they offering?" I asked, moving to my home office to review any documents Jessica might send. Full confession of corporate espionage activities, complete cooperation with our investigation into compromised materials, and of course, uncontested divorce with no claims against your assets. Jessica's tone held professional satisfaction. They're also proposing a 5-year non-compete agreement covering all security technology sectors where Taylor operates. It was essentially everything I'd demanded during our confrontation, a complete capitulation. Under normal circumstances, such a swift and comprehensive surrender would feel like victory. Instead, it merely underscored how thoroughly my judgment had failed. The man I'd trusted most in the world had folded like a house of cards at the first sign of serious consequences. "What's the catch?" I asked, knowing there had to be one. Jessica hesitated. "Confidentiality, complete and absolute. No public disclosure of the espionage, no criminal charges, no industry blacklisting. He wants to preserve the ability to work in adjacent technology fields." Of course, Michael's primary concern wasn't reconciliation or even avoiding financial penalty. It was protecting his future employability, his professional reputation. Even in surrender, his priorities were nakedly self-serving. "Send me the proposal. I'll review it before the board meeting," I said, keeping my voice neutral despite the fresh wave of disappointment. "And Jessica? Have security prepared for his noon pickup of personal items. I want 2 guards present the entire time." After ending the call, I sat at my desk, thinking strategically about the board meeting ahead. The 12-member Taylor Security Solutions Board included my father, technically retired but still chairman, 3 family members, and 8 independent directors from various technology and security backgrounds. They would be concerned primarily with the company's exposure, potential damage to client relationships, and our plan to prevent similar breaches. The elevator chimed, announcing a visitor to my penthouse. Checking the security feed, I was surprised to see my father standing in the private lobby, looking characteristically impatient, even though he was the one arriving unannounced. I opened the door to find him holding 2 cups from our favorite coffee shop and a folder tucked under his arm. "Dad? I thought you were meeting us at the office." David Taylor, at 68, remained an imposing figure, tall and straight-backed, with sharp eyes that missed nothing, and the same analytical mind that had built Taylor Security from a garage startup into an industry leader. He studied me carefully, assessing my state with the same precision he applied to security vulnerabilities. "Thought you might appreciate the moral support before facing the firing squad," he said, offering me one of the coffees. "Also, your mother threatened bodily harm if I didn't check on you personally. She wanted to come herself, but I convinced her you'd prefer handling this without an audience." The mention of my mother brought a lump to my throat. Catherine Taylor was fiercely protective of her only child, and the news of Michael's betrayal had likely enraged her. That my father had managed to dissuade her from storming the penthouse was testament to his diplomatic skills. "Thank you," I said, accepting the coffee and stepping aside to let him enter. "For the coffee and for intercepting Mom." He nodded, moving into the living room and noting the absence of Michael's possessions with approval. "You've been efficient." "No point delaying the inevitable," I replied, joining him on the sofa. His attorney already reached out with settlement terms. My father raised an eyebrow. "That was quick. Guilty conscience or fear of consequences?" "Definitely the latter. Olivia Reeves gave Next Gen a full statement last night. Michael's trying to salvage what he can from the wreckage." Dad opened the folder he'd brought, spreading several documents on the coffee table. I suspected as much when Jessica briefed me last night. That's why I had our technical team prepare this analysis of what was actually compromised. I leaned forward, examining the detailed assessment. It showed precisely which files had been accessed, when, and, most importantly, what portions had been successfully exfiltrated versus merely viewed. "This is less severe than we thought," I said, scanning the analysis with growing relief. The core protocol architecture wasn't fully captured. "Because of the security partitioning you implemented in February," my father confirmed, "the most critical components were protected by your enhanced verification system. Michael only managed to extract the commercial implementation guidelines, not the underlying cryptographic innovations." February, 4 months ago. I'd upgraded our internal security protocols as a standard practice, not because I suspected any threat, let alone one from my husband. The irony wasn't lost on me. "So our intellectual property advantage is still intact," I concluded, feeling the first genuine relief since discovering Michael's betrayal. "Largely, yes, and there's more." My father turned to the second document, a preliminary legal analysis. "Jessica consulted with Harrison this morning. Harrison Montgomery was Taylor Security's longtime intellectual property counsel. Based on Michael's limited access to the partitioned materials, we have a strong case that any next-gen implementations derived from the stolen information would constitute patent infringement." The strategic picture was becoming clearer and considerably more favorable than I'd initially feared. Michael and NextGen had compromised some valuable information, but the most critical innovations remained protected. More importantly, we had clear documentation of the theft, creating a powerful deterrent against any attempt to use the stolen material. "They didn't get what they thought they got," I said, understanding dawning. My father smiled grimly. "Exactly. Which puts us in a stronger negotiation position than they realize." We spent the next hour refining our approach for the board meeting, identifying key points to emphasize and potential concerns to address. Though the conversation focused primarily on corporate strategy, I could feel my father's concern beneath his professional demeanor. Finally, as we prepared to leave for the office, he placed a hand on my shoulder. "Emma, I need to ask, are you really all right?" The simple question, asked without preamble or platitude, nearly broke my carefully maintained composure. My father wasn't one for emotional displays or lengthy discussions of feelings. His direct approach was both characteristic and exactly what I needed. "No," I admitted, matching his honesty. "But I will be." He nodded, accepting this without pressing further. "Your mother and we never trusted him completely. Not because of anything specific, just instinct," I finished for him. "I know, I should have listened." "You loved him," my father said simply. "Love and logic don't always communicate well with each other. God knows your mother has overlooked my flaws more times than I deserve." "This was more than a flaw, Dad." "Yes," he agreed soberly. "It was betrayal, plain and simple. And there's no excuse for that." We rode to the office in companionable silence, each preparing in our own way for the meeting ahead. The Taylor Security Building dominated its corner of the Chicago skyline, 52 floors of gleaming glass and steel housing one of the world's premier digital security firms. As we entered through the executive entrance, employees nodded respectfully, their expressions carefully neutral. News of Michael's actions had undoubtedly spread throughout the company despite our efforts to contain it. The boardroom was already full when we arrived, conversations ceasing as we entered. I felt 12 pairs of eyes assessing me, looking for signs of emotional distress or weakness. Instead, they found the CEO they needed, composed, prepared, and unflinchingly direct, as I laid out both the breach details and our response strategy. "The situation is serious, but contained," I concluded after a thorough presentation. "Our core intellectual property remains secure, and we've already implemented additional protections against similar incidents. More importantly, we have conclusive evidence of corporate espionage, giving us significant leverage in negotiations with NextGen. Harrison Montgomery, our IP counsel, elaborated on the legal aspects, explaining how our documentation of the breach positioned us advantageously. NextGen faces potential criminal charges, civil liability, and devastating reputational damage. Their legal team is undoubtedly advising immediate settlement on whatever terms we find acceptable. Victoria Chen, our newest board member and the former head of cybersecurity for a major financial institution, leaned forward. And what about Michael Wilson? What are we doing about his involvement? The question hung in the air, the personal dimension of the betrayal suddenly front and center. I maintained my professional demeanor despite the discomfort. Mr. Wilson's attorney has proposed settlement terms including full confession, cooperation with our investigation, and comprehensive non-compete agreements. Our legal team is reviewing the offer. That's the corporate response, Victoria pressed. But he wasn't just an external threat. He was your husband, with unique access and insight into Taylor security. The board needs to understand how this personal connection might affect your judgment regarding appropriate consequences. The challenge was fair, if uncomfortable. In Victoria's position, I would have asked the same question. My personal relationship with Mr. Wilson is over, stated clearly. My judgment regarding appropriate corporate response is based solely on what best serves Taylor Security's interests. If the board feels my personal connection compromises my objectivity, I would, of course, recuse myself from those decisions. My father intervened smoothly. Perhaps I can address this concern. The separation of personal and professional considerations is precisely why we've engaged independent counsel to evaluate settlement terms. The board will have full visibility into all proposed actions before any agreements are finalized. The tension in the room eased slightly. After several more questions about technical details and client impact, the board voted unanimously to approve our proposed response strategy, including the framework for settlement negotiations with both Michael and NextGen. As the meeting concluded, various board members approached to offer brief words of support, some awkward, others genuine. Victoria Chen was the last to speak with me. I apologize if my questions seemed harsh, she said quietly, but it needed to be asked. I understand completely, I assured her. In your position, I'd have done the same. She studied me thoughtfully. For what it's worth, your handling of this situation has been exemplary. Many executives would struggle to maintain such professionalism when faced with both personal and corporate betrayal. Thank you, I replied, genuinely appreciating her candor, though I suspect the real test comes after the immediate crisis passes. Victoria nodded in understanding. The emergency response is the easy part. Adrenaline and training take over. It's the rebuilding that requires true strength. Her words stayed with me as I moved through the rest of the morning, attending to the various tasks required to address the breach. By 11:30, I returned to my office to prepare for Michael's scheduled visit to collect his belongings. Though I had no intention of seeing him personally, I wanted to be in the building, maintaining some control over the situation. Jessica arrived with the finalized settlement proposal from Michael's attorneys, now reviewed by our legal team and adjusted to better protect Taylor Security's interests. It's a good deal for us, she confirmed. Everything we asked for, plus some additional protections Harrison suggested. Michael gets his confidentiality and avoids criminal charges. We get full cooperation and protection of our intellectual property. I reviewed the document carefully, noting the precise language that would prevent Michael from working in any capacity that might leverage knowledge obtained during his relationship with Taylor Security. The non-compete was comprehensive, extending beyond just direct competition to include consulting, advisory roles, or any position that might indirectly benefit from his exposure to our technology. He'll still have a career, Jessica noted, following my focus on the non-compete clauses. Just not in security technology. His core software development skills are transferable to many industries. More than he deserves, I commented, signing the agreement. But it's the right decision for the company. As Jessica gathered the signed documents, my assistant buzzed to inform me that Michael had arrived to collect his belongings. Security would escort him directly to the penthouse, where his packed items awaited under guard. "Do you want me to stay?" Jessica asked, concern evident in her voice. I shook my head. "I'm not going up there. He can take his things and leave. I have no interest in another conversation." She nodded in understanding, but before leaving added, "Emma, at some point, not today, but eventually, you might want that conversation. For closure, if nothing else." The suggestion was well-intentioned, but misguided. What closure could there possibly be with someone who had systematically deceived me for years? What explanation could justify not just betraying my trust, but attempting to undermine my family's company? After Jessica left, I found myself restless, unable to focus on the work before me. Against my better judgment, I checked the security feed to the penthouse, watching as Michael methodically loaded his belongings onto a cart under the watchful eyes of 2 Taylor security guards. He looked diminished somehow, his typically confident posture replaced by the careful movements of someone aware they were under surveillance. As he gathered the last of his items, he paused by the bookshelf where we'd displayed our wedding photo. The frame was empty now, the photograph packed away with other mementos of our relationship. Michael stared at the empty space for a long moment before turning to leave. Something in his expression, regret, resignation, or simply acceptance, struck me unexpectedly. For the first time since discovering his betrayal, I felt a flicker of something beyond anger or professional calculation. Not forgiveness, certainly, but perhaps the beginning of understanding that the man I'd married was more complex than either the loving husband I'd believed in or the calculated deceiver he'd revealed himself to be. I shut off the feed, pushing away the unwelcome complication. Now wasn't the time for nuance or emotional reconciliation. The priority was protecting Taylor security and moving forward, personally and professionally. My phone buzzed with a message from Sarah, my best friend since college. "Lunch? You shouldn't be alone today." I hesitated only briefly before accepting. Sarah had been suspicious of Michael from the beginning, sensing something in him that my love had blinded me to. She'd voiced her concerns once, early in our relationship, then respected my decision when I defended him. Now I needed her straightforward perspective more than ever. We met at a small French bistro several blocks from the Taylor building, tucked away from the main business district where we were unlikely to encounter colleagues or industry acquaintances. Sarah was already waiting when I arrived, her expression a mix of sympathy and fierce protectiveness. "I would ask how you're doing, but that seems ridiculously inadequate," she said as I slid into the booth across from her. "I'm functioning," I replied honestly. "The corporate crisis management is actually helping, gives me something concrete to focus on." Sarah nodded in understanding. As the chief marketing officer for a major tech company herself, she understood the strange comfort of professional challenges during personal turmoil. "And the non-functioning parts?" she pressed gently. "The parts that aren't related to Taylor security or legal settlements." I considered the question, realizing I'd been deliberately avoiding exactly those aspects of the situation. "Those parts are suspended, on hold until the practical matters are resolved." "Emma," Sarah said carefully, "I've known you for 15 years. You don't put emotions on hold. You bury them under work and rationality until they eventually explode. Remember the Anderson project in college?" I winced at the memory. During our senior year, my first serious boyfriend had ended our relationship the week before final projects were due. I'd channeled all my hurt into obsessive work on my engineering project, refusing to acknowledge the breakup. After acing the presentation, I'd had a complete emotional breakdown, ending up sobbing in Sarah's dorm room for 3 straight days. This is different, I insisted. I'm not denying what happened or how I feel about it. I'm just prioritizing the company's needs right now. And when those needs are addressed? When the settlement is signed and the security breach contained? What then? It was a fair question, and one I hadn't allowed myself to consider fully. What would recovery look like beyond the professional response? How would I rebuild trust, not just in potential partners, but in my own judgment? I don't know, I admitted. Finally. I haven't thought that far ahead. Sarah reached across the table, squeezing my hand. Well, when you're ready to figure it out, I'm here. Whether that means getting drunk and burning his things in effigy or marathon watching terrible rom-coms while eating our body weight in ice cream. The absurdity of the image, two high-powered executives engaging in cliched breakup rituals, broke through my carefully maintained composure, drawing a genuine laugh. I don't think setting anything on fire would look good in the press, right? Now, I pointed out, but I might take you up on the ice cream option. Our food arrived and the conversation shifted to lighter topics: Sarah's recent vacation, mutual friends updates, industry gossip that had nothing to do with my situation. The normalcy was therapeutic, a reminder that life continued beyond betrayal and corporate crisis. As we were finishing dessert, yes, I'd ordered it despite the ice cream offer. Comfort calories seemed justified under the circumstances. Sarah's expression grew serious again. There's something I need to tell you, and I'm not sure it's the right time, but keeping it from you feels wrong. My stomach tightened with apprehension. What is it? Sarah hesitated, then pushed forward resolutely. About 6 months ago, Michael approached Tom about a job at Meridian Systems. Tom was Sarah's husband, the CTO at Meridian, one of Taylor Security's direct competitors. Tom told him there weren't any appropriate openings, Sarah continued. But Michael was persistent. He implied he had access to proprietary information that might be valuable to Meridian. Tom shut down the conversation immediately and told me about it later that day. I processed this new information, the timeline aligning with other aspects of Michael's betrayal. 6 months ago, before the affair with Olivia, before the next-gen connection, he'd been exploring options, testing potential opportunities with multiple competitors. Why didn't you tell me then? I asked, struggling to keep accusation from my tone. Sarah looked genuinely pained. Tom wanted to. I convinced him to let me handle it. I planned to talk to you, but then she trailed off, clearly uncomfortable. But then what? Then you told me you and Michael were finally trying to start a family, Sarah admitted. You seemed so happy, so certain about your future together. I convinced myself that maybe Michael had just been exploring options, that it wasn't as suspicious as it seemed. The reminder hit harder than I expected. 3 months ago, we had indeed decided to try for a baby. Or rather, I had decided. And Michael had agreed with what I now recognized as feigned enthusiasm. The timing coincided perfectly, with the beginning of his affair with Olivia and the installation of the keylogger on our home network. Had he agreed to family planning knowing he was actively betraying me? Had he been willing to father a child while simultaneously undermining my company and planning his exit strategy? The calculated cruelty of it stole my breath. Emma, I'm so sorry, Sarah said, misinterpreting my silence as anger toward her. I should have told you immediately. I failed you as a friend. I shook my head, forcing myself back to the present moment. No, you made the best decision you could with the information you had. And you're telling me now, which is what matters. Tom feels terrible. He wanted to come tell you himself, but I thought that might be overwhelming. Tell him I appreciate his integrity, I said sincerely. And that Meridian is lucky to have an executive who doesn't engage in corporate espionage. Sarah nodded, relief evident in her expression. He'll be glad to hear that. And just so you know, after Michael's approach, Tom implemented additional security protocols for any interactions with Taylor-adjacent personnel. He wanted to protect both companies from potential compromise. The information was another piece in the expanding puzzle of Michael's betrayal. Not just NextGen, but potentially multiple companies, multiple betrayals. He'd cast a wide net, looking for the most advantageous position, the best leverage for his knowledge of Taylor security. As we left the restaurant, Sarah hugged me tightly. "Promise you'll call if you need anything, day or night. And I mean, anything. Security team to change your locks, alibi for justifiable homicide, someone to proofread angry emails you should never actually send." I laughed despite myself. "I promise. Though I think the security team has the locks well covered." Back at the office, I found my father waiting in my private conference room, expression grim. "What's happened?" I asked immediately, recognizing his problem-solving posture. "NextGen's CEO called," he replied. "Theodore Hammond himself, not their legal team. He's requesting a private meeting, just him, you, and me. No attorneys, no formal record." This was unexpected. Theodore Hammond was legendary in the industry, brilliant, ruthless, and notoriously hands-off with operational details. For him to involve himself personally in the situation suggested either grave concern or unusual opportunity. "When does he want to meet?" I asked, mentally reviewing my afternoon schedule. "He's downstairs in the private reception area," my father replied. "Right now." The audacity was breathtaking, showing up unannounced, expecting immediate accommodation. It was also intriguing. What could be so urgent that Hammond would come personally to Taylor Security headquarters without appointment? "Does Jessica know he's here?" "No," my father confirmed. "He came alone, requested absolute discretion. Said it concerns matters beyond the current situation with Michael." The unusual approach warranted caution, but also consideration. If Hammond had information beyond what we'd already uncovered, it could be valuable, potentially critical to fully understanding the scope of the breach. "Have security sweep the conference room for recording devices," I decided, "and inform Hammond we'll meet with him, but only for 15 minutes. As my father left to make the arrangements, I took a moment to collect myself. Whatever Hammond's purpose, this meeting would require complete focus and control. The CEO of NextGen wouldn't have come personally unless something significant was at stake, something beyond the already serious concerns of corporate espionage and marital betrayal. For the first time since discovering Michael's deception, I felt a flicker of uncertainty about what might come next. The carefully managed crisis was about to introduce a new variable, one I couldn't predict or prepare for. Taking a deep breath, I straightened my suit jacket and headed to the conference room, steeling myself for whatever revelation awaited. Whatever Hammond was bringing to the table, I would face it with the same clarity and resolve that had carried me through the past. 48 hours. The game was changing again, but this time I wouldn't be caught unprepared. Theodore Hammond wasn't what I expected. The legendary CEO of NextGen Technologies stood as we entered the conference room, his tall frame surprisingly lean for a man in his 60s. Unlike the power suits and expensive watches that characterized most tech executives, Hammond wore a simple blue button-down and khakis. Only his eyes revealed his reputation. Sharp, evaluative, missing nothing. "Ms. Taylor, Mr. Taylor," he greeted us with a slight nod. "Thank you for agreeing to meet on such short notice." 15 minutes, Mr. Hammond, I replied, taking my seat across from him. As you can imagine, we have a rather full schedule today. My father remained standing, positioning himself slightly behind my chair, a deliberate choice that signaled I was leading this conversation while he provided support. The dynamic wasn't lost on Hammond, whose gaze moved between us with evident calculation. "I'll be direct then," Hammond said, placing his hands flat on the table. "The situation with Michael Wilson and Olivia Reeves represents a catastrophic Breach of NextGen's ethical standards. I'm here personally because this matter goes beyond standard corporate competition into territory I find deeply troubling. Not at all what I'd expected. Hammond was positioning himself as the aggrieved party rather than the architect of corporate espionage. Your company initiated and maintained a systematic operation to steal Taylor Security's proprietary technology, I stated flatly. Your executive conducted a personal relationship with my husband specifically to facilitate that theft. Those actions suggest NextGen's ethical standards are flexible at best, non-existent at worst. Hammond didn't flinch at my directness. The operation was initiated by our Strategic Acquisitions Division without executive oversight or approval. When Olivia Reeves submitted her resignation in full statement yesterday, it was the first I heard of the entire situation. You expect us to believe NextGen's CEO had no knowledge of a major corporate espionage operation against a primary competitor? My father asked, skepticism evident in his tone. I expect you to verify everything I say, Hammond countered. Which is why I've brought this. He slid a thumb drive across the table. Complete internal communication records regarding the operation, including emails and messages that were deliberately kept from executive visibility. You'll find that the initiative originated with Carter Reynolds, head of strategic acquisitions, who created a siloed reporting structure specifically to prevent normal oversight channels from functioning. I made no move to take the drive, regarding it with appropriate suspicion. And we should trust that these records are complete and unaltered because they're authenticated with blockchain verification timestamps that even NextGen's systems team can't modify, Hammond replied. And because I've already provided copies to the FBI's Cybercrime Division and the SEC. As of this morning, Carter Reynolds and 4 members of his team have been terminated and are under federal investigation. The claim was significant and easily verifiable. If Hammond had indeed gone to federal authorities, the paper trail would exist. More importantly, no CEO would falsely claim to have initiated such an investigation. Why? I asked directly. Why expose your own company to federal scrutiny and potential charges? Why come here personally? Hammond's expression shifted, a hint of genuine emotion breaking through his controlled demeanor. Because some lines shouldn't be crossed, regardless of competitive advantage. Corporate espionage is unfortunately common in our industry. We all know that. But leveraging personal relationships, targeting spouses, installing surveillance software in private residences. He shook his head, in evident disgust. That crosses from business ethics into personal violation. My father moved to stand beside me, his posture protective. Admirable sentiments, but they don't explain your presence here today. You could have had your legal team convey this information along with settlement offers. Hammond nodded in acknowledgement. That's true, but there's more to this situation than just the breach of your systems. He hesitated, seeming to choose his words carefully. Ms. Taylor, how much do you know about Michael Wilson's background before you met him? The question hit like a physical blow. In the whirlwind of discovering Michael's betrayal, I hadn't even considered questioning my understanding of his past. What exactly are you implying, Mr. Hammond? I kept my voice steady despite the sudden unease coiling in my stomach. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating that Michael Wilson's credentials and background don't withstand scrutiny. The small, security software company he supposedly founded? It never existed beyond a website and some basic incorporation papers. His MIT education? He attended for 1 semester before dropping out. His early career achievements? Largely fabricated or exaggerated. I fought to maintain my composed expression, though internally my mind raced. Could this be true? Had I failed to verify even the basic facts about the man I married? No, it wasn't possible. Taylor Security had robust vetting procedures for anyone with access to sensitive information. Surely we would have discovered such fundamental deceptions. We conduct thorough background checks on anyone connected to Taylor. Security, my father interjected, clearly following the same line of thought. Including family members of key executives. Hammond nodded. Yes, you do. And 5 years ago, those checks would have revealed the discrepancies I'm describing. But someone created an elaborate digital backstory for Michael Wilson approximately 6 months before you met him, Ms. Taylor. All the verification points were established. Websites, databases, references. A complete digital footprint backdated to establish credibility. That's not possible, I stated, though uncertainty crept into my voice. Our security protocols would have detected inconsistencies in the digital timeline. Unless the person who crafted the false backstory knew exactly what your security protocols would be looking for, Hammond countered. Ms. Taylor, we believe Michael Wilson was placed in your path deliberately, with the specific intention of gaining access to Taylor Security's technology. Not just by NextGen, we're merely his most recent target, but as part of a long-term operation by an entity that specializes in technology theft. The implications were staggering. If Hammond was right, Michael hadn't just betrayed me for personal gain or professional advancement. Our entire relationship, from our first meeting through 4 years of marriage, had been an orchestrated deception. What entity? My father demanded, his voice hardening. Who would have both motive and capability for such an operation? Hammond spread his hands in a gesture of qualified uncertainty. We have theories but limited concrete evidence. The most likely candidate is Perseus Group. They specialize in acquiring cutting-edge technology through various means, both legal and otherwise, then selling it to the highest bidder. Perseus Group. The name sent a chill through me. Taylor. Security had encountered them peripherally over the years, a shadowy organization that operated in the gray areas between corporate intelligence, technology acquisition, and outright espionage. They weren't the faceless hackers or nation-state actors that typically threatened security companies, but something more insidious. Business people who treated proprietary technology as a commodity to be acquired by any means necessary. What evidence connects Michael to Perseus? I asked, professional curiosity temporarily overriding personal shock. Hammond reached for the thumb drive he'd offered earlier. It's all here. Financial traces, communication patterns, behavioral markers consistent with their recruitment profile. Not definitive proof. Perseus is too careful for that. But compelling, circumstantial evidence. I finally took the drive, though I had no intention of connecting it to any Taylor system without thorough scanning. You still haven't explained why you're bringing this to us directly? What does NextGen gain? Hammond leaned forward, intensity replacing his earlier measured approach. Perseus doesn't just steal technology, Ms. Taylor. They weaponize it. Your quantum-resistant encryption protocol? In the right hands, it protects data and privacy. In theirs, it becomes a tool for hiding malicious code, enabling attacks that can't be detected or traced. The same is true for much of Taylor Security's innovation portfolio. You're concerned about market reputation, my father concluded. If Taylor's stolen technology is used in attacks, the entire security sector suffers. That's part of it, Hammond admitted. But there's a more immediate concern. Perseus doesn't sell to just any buyer. They cultivate relationships with specific clients, including several that are on international watch lists for cyber-terrorism activities. If Michael Wilson delivered Taylor protocols to Perseus, they could already be implementing weaponized versions for deployment. The potential ramifications expanded beyond corporate competition or personal betrayal into matters of national security. If Hammond was right, if Michael had been a Perseus operative all along, the impact could extend far beyond Taylor Security or NextGen's corporate interests. What exactly are you proposing? I asked, my mind already racing ahead to potential responses. A joint task force, Hammond replied promptly. Taylor Security and NextGen's best security experts working together with appropriate federal agencies to trace Michael Wilson's activities. identify what may have been compromised, and implement countermeasures. It was a reasonable proposal, though the idea of Taylor Security working directly with NextGen after their involvement in corporate espionage against us, whether sanctioned from the top or not, was problematic at best. And in exchange? My father asked, cutting to the inevitable negotiation. Hammond didn't hesitate. Full immunity for NextGen in any civil or criminal proceedings related to the Taylor Security breach. Public acknowledgement that the activities were unauthorized and conducted by rogue employees who have been terminated. And a partnership agreement giving NextGen licensed access to specific Taylor technologies in exchange for appropriate compensation. The offer was both bold and shrewd. Hammond was leveraging a potential crisis to secure legitimate access to Taylor technology that NextGen had previously attempted to steal. Yet, if his concerns about Perseus were genuine, the collaboration could serve both companies' interests while addressing a legitimate security threat. "We'll need verification of everything you've shared," I said, neither accepting nor rejecting the proposal outright. Starting with confirmation that federal agencies are indeed investigating Carter Reynolds and his team. "Of course," Hammond agreed readily. "I've arranged for a secure call with FBI Deputy Director Harmon at your convenience. He can confirm NextGen's cooperation with their investigation." The preparation suggested Hammond had anticipated our response, or perhaps simply demonstrated the thorough approach that had made him a legend in the industry. "One more question, Mr. Hammond," I said, studying him carefully. "When exactly did you discover the connection between Michael Wilson and Perseus Group?" It was the critical question. If Hammond had known before Michael's betrayal was exposed, his failure to warn Taylor Security would undermine his current position as an ethical actor concerned about potential weaponization of stolen technology. Hammond met my gaze directly. 3 days ago, one of our security researchers flagged anomalous communication patterns from NextGen systems to servers associated with known Perseus operations. When we investigated, we found Carter Reynolds had authorized unusual access privileges for external consultants, including Michael Wilson, who had no legitimate business with NextGen beyond his connection to Olivia Reeves. "And yet you waited until now to bring this to our attention," my father noted skeptically. "We needed sufficient evidence before making such extraordinary claims," Hammond countered. "And frankly, until Olivia Reeves provided her statement yesterday, we couldn't be certain of the full picture. The moment we confirmed the connection, I contacted federal authorities and came here directly." His explanation was plausible, though I remained cautious about accepting it at face value. Theodore Hammond hadn't built NextGen technologies by being straightforward or self-sacrificing. "We'll need time to consider your proposal and verify your claims," I said, rising to indicate our 15 minutes had concluded. "Expect our response within 48 hours." Hammond stood, accepting the time frame with a nod. "Fair enough. But I urge you not to delay too long, Ms. Taylor. If Perseus has acquired even portions of your quantum encryption protocol, the window for effective countermeasures is limited." As security escorted Hammond from the building, my father and I remained in the conference room, the thumb drive sitting between us like a live grenade. "Do you believe him?" I asked once we were alone. My father considered the question with characteristic thoroughness. "Some of it, certainly. The federal investigation can be verified independently. The connection between Michael and Perseus..." He sighed, running a hand through his silver hair. "It's plausible, which is disturbing enough. Whether Hammond's motives are as altruistic as he portrays them, that I doubt very much." I nodded in agreement. "He's using this situation to gain legitimate access to technology NextGen failed to steal successfully. Classic Hammond, turning a potential liability into a strategic advantage, while also positioning himself as the ethical actor who exposed corporate espionage rather than the CEO who presided over it," my father added. "The man has always been a master strategist." We fell silent, both contemplating the implications of Hammond's revelations. If Michael had indeed been a Perseus operative from the beginning, If our entire relationship had been constructed as part of a long-term technology theft operation, the personal betrayal reached depths I could barely comprehend. "We need to verify independently," I said finally. "Full background investigation on Michael, tracing back beyond our first meeting, and secure scanning of the drive Hammond provided before we access any of its contents." My father nodded in agreement. "I'll contact Sherman at the Bureau. He can confirm whether Hammond's claim about the federal investigation is legitimate." Sherman McAllister was a longtime FBI contact who had worked with Taylor Security on several cybersecurity initiatives over the years. If anyone could provide reliable confirmation without triggering formal channels, it would be Sherman. "And Michael?" My father asked carefully. "Do you want to be involved in that investigation, or would you prefer some distance?" It was a considerate question, recognizing the emotional impact Hammond's claims would have if verified. Part of me wanted to delegate the entire matter, to avoid confronting the possibility that the man I'd loved had never truly existed. But professional responsibility outweighed personal comfort. "I need to be involved," I said firmly. "If Michael has been operating as a technology acquisition agent all along, understanding his methods and targets is critical to our security response." My father squeezed my shoulder gently, a rare physical gesture from a man who typically expressed support, through practical action rather than overt affection. "I've always admired your courage, Emma, since you were a little girl taking apart security systems to understand how they worked." The memory brought an unexpected smile. When I was 7, I disassembled our home security panel to examine its components, triggering alarms that brought 3 police cars to our driveway. Instead of punishing me, my father had helped me reconstruct the system, explaining each component's function as we worked. "I learned from the best," I replied, grateful for his steady presence. "Now let's find out exactly what we're dealing with." The next several hours passed in focused activity. Sherman confirmed that the FBI had indeed opened an investigation into Carter Reynolds and several next-gen employees for potential violations of the Economic Espionage Act. Our technical team began the painstaking process of securely analyzing Hammond's thumb drive, isolating it in a contained environment where any potential malware couldn't reach Taylor systems. By early evening, we had preliminary confirmation of Hammond's most disturbing claim. Michael Wilson's background showed significant discrepancies when investigated beyond standard verification channels. The small security company he'd supposedly founded, Wilson Protection Systems, had never operated as a functioning business. While incorporation papers existed, there were no tax filings, employee records, or client contracts. More disturbingly, deep analysis of digital records showed evidence of backdating, articles and industry mentions that appeared to be from years ago, but contained metadata suggesting more recent creation. Someone had constructed an elaborate digital history for Michael Wilson, establishing just enough credibility to pass standard background checks. I sat in my office reviewing these findings as darkness fell over Chicago, the city lights creating a glittering backdrop to my reflection in the window glass. The woman looking back at me seemed like a stranger, outwardly composed and professional, while internally grappling with the dissolution of her understanding of the past 5 years. Had any of it been real? The intellectual connection I'd felt with Michael at our first meeting, the shared interests and values I'd believed we had, the future we'd planned together, had it all been calculated manipulation? A soft knock at my door interrupted these painful questions. Jessica entered, carrying additional reports from our investigation team. "You should go home, Emma," she said, noting the late hour. "The teams can continue working, and you need rest." I smiled wryly. "Home to what? An empty penthouse filled with memories of a relationship that may have been entirely fabricated?" Jessica's expression softened with genuine concern. "Then come stay with Mark and me for a few days. Our guest room is always ready, and Mark makes a mean breakfast burrito." The offer was tempting, Jessica and her husband had been friends since before my marriage, their home a place of genuine warmth and normalcy. But retreat felt like weakness when I needed strength most. "Thank you, but I need to face it sometime," I replied. "Besides, I've had the security system completely overhauled. The penthouse is probably the most secure residential space in Chicago at this point." Jessica conceded with a nod, placing the new reports on my desk. "At least let your driver take you home. You've been going non-stop for almost 48 hours. "I promise," I assured her. "Just let me review these first." After she left, I turned to the new reports, detailed financial analyses tracing unusual patterns in Michael's accounts. What they revealed was both fascinating and disturbing. Periodic infusions of cash from untraceable sources, carefully structured to avoid detection. Not enormous sums that would trigger automatic alerts, but consistent payments that cumulatively represented significant compensation over time. Most telling was the timing. The first such payment appeared exactly 1 week before Michael approached me at the tech conference where we met. Subsequent payments coincided with key developments in our relationship: our engagement, our marriage, my promotion to CEO when my father stepped back from daily operations. The evidence was becoming overwhelming. Michael Wilson, or whatever his real name might be, had targeted me specifically, orchestrating our chance meeting and subsequent relationship to gain access to Taylor Security's technology. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was professional, calculated, and years in the making. As I prepared to leave for the night, my phone rang, an unknown number with a Washington, D.C. area code. "Emma Taylor," I answered cautiously. "Ms. Taylor, this is Deputy Director Harmon with the FBI." The voice was clipped, professional. "I understand you've been in contact with Sherman McAllister regarding a matter of mutual concern." "That's correct," I confirmed, immediately alert. "Regarding Theodore Hammond's claims about an investigation into next-gen employees." "Yes, I'm calling to personally confirm that investigation and to request an urgent meeting. We've developed new information regarding Michael Wilson that suggests immediate action may be necessary." My pulse quickened. "What kind of information?" "Not suitable for phone discussion, I'm afraid, even on secured lines. Can you come to our Chicago field office tomorrow morning at 8 a.m.? The timing suggested genuine urgency. "I'll be there. Should I bring counsel?" "That would be advisable," Harmon replied. "And Ms. Taylor, I recommend discretion regarding this conversation. The fewer people who know about tomorrow's meeting, the better." After hanging up, I sat motionless for several minutes, absorbing this latest development. Federal involvement elevated the situation beyond corporate espionage or personal betrayal into potential national security concerns. Hammond's warnings about Perseus Group weaponizing Taylor technology suddenly seemed less like strategic positioning and more like legitimate alarm. I called my driver, deciding to head home despite the emotional challenge of returning to the space I'd shared with Michael. Whatever tomorrow's meeting revealed, I needed rest and clarity to face it effectively. The penthouse felt different when I arrived, not just because Michael's things were gone, but because my perception of the space had fundamentally changed. What once felt like a sanctuary now seemed like a stage set where I'd unwittingly performed in someone else's production. I moved through the rooms methodically, checking security measures and adjusting lights. In the kitchen, I found myself staring at the refrigerator, where a simple white envelope was attached with a magnet. My name was written on it in Michael's distinctive handwriting. He must have left it during his supervised visit to collect his belongings. The security guards would have checked it for anything dangerous, but allowed its placement as a harmless communication. I stared at the envelope for a long moment, uncertain whether to open it or simply discard it unread. What could Michael possibly say that would matter now? What explanation or justification could possibly mitigate what he'd done? Curiosity finally overcame caution. I opened the envelope and removed a single sheet of paper containing just a few lines. "Emma, By now you know most of it. Not all. Some things are beyond even your investigator's reach. But enough to understand this wasn't what it appeared to be. What you don't know yet, it wasn't all false. Not for me. Not in the end. Be careful who you trust going forward. Not everyone is who they claim to be. M. The cryptic message raised more questions than it answered. What did he mean that it wasn't all false? Was he claiming to have developed genuine feelings despite the deception? And the warning about trust, was it a general caution or specific guidance about someone in my circle? I placed the note in a secure evidence bag, intending to share it with the FBI tomorrow. Whatever game Michael was still playing, whatever manipulation he was attempting even now, federal investigators should be aware of it. As I prepared for bed, exhaustion finally overtaking adrenaline, my phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. Check the painting in your office, behind the frame. I froze, staring at the message. It could be from Michael, suggesting some hidden message or object he'd concealed. But it could also be a trap, an attempt to lure me into triggering something harmful. After a moment's consideration, I called building security, requesting 2 officers join me in the penthouse. If there was something hidden behind the painting, in my home office, I wouldn't discover it alone. 20 minutes later, with security personnel monitoring carefully, I carefully removed the large abstract painting that hung behind my desk. A wedding gift from Michael that he'd claimed reminded him of the northern lights we'd seen during our honeymoon in Iceland. At first, nothing seemed unusual about the frame or the wall behind it. But as one of the security officers examined the painting's backing more closely, he discovered a small device attached to the wooden frame, a sophisticated listening device, nearly undetectable unless specifically searching for it. It's active, Ms. Taylor, the security specialist confirmed after scanning it. Broadcasting to an external receiver. A bug in my home office, where I frequently took calls and reviewed sensitive information related to Taylor security. How long has it been there? I asked, though I suspected the answer. The specialist examined the device carefully. Based on the battery type and wear patterns, I'd estimate at least 2 years, possibly longer. 2 years minimum. Michael had been monitoring my private conversations in my own home for at least half our marriage. The violation felt physical, as if the very air in the penthouse had been contaminated. Sweep everything, I instructed the security team. Every room, every piece of furniture, every electronic device. I want to know if there's anything else. By midnight, they had discovered 3 additional surveillance devices. One in the living room concealed in a speaker system, one in the bedroom hidden in the alarm clock, and most disturbingly, one in my jewelry box where I kept personal items including my passport and spare security credentials. The comprehensive invasion of privacy left me feeling physically ill. This wasn't just corporate espionage. It was intimate violation on a level I could barely process. Michael hadn't just betrayed my trust professionally. He had systematically monitored my private life, my personal conversations, my most vulnerable moments. As the security team documented and removed the devices, I made a decision. I couldn't stay in the penthouse tonight, or perhaps ever again. Every corner now held the possibility of hidden observation, every personal moment potentially exposed to unknown watchers. I packed an overnight bag with essentials and called Sarah, hoping. Her earlier offer still stood despite the late hour. Her immediate, unwavering response, "I'm sending Mark to pick you up right now," brought the first sense of relief I'd felt in hours. While waiting for Mark to arrive, I received another text from the unknown number. There will be more. Not just in your home. Be at Washington Park, North Entrance, 6 a.m. tomorrow. Come alone if you want the full truth about Michael Wilson. I stared at the message, weighing my options. The meeting with the FBI wasn't until 8 a.m. Theoretically, I could meet this mysterious texter beforehand, but the risk was substantial. This could be Michael attempting to manipulate me further, or someone from Perseus Group trying to leverage the situation for unknown purposes. Yet sometimes the most direct path to truth required walking into uncertain territory. Whoever had texted me knew about the surveillance devices in my home, information that few people could possess. They might indeed have crucial information about Michael's true identity and activities. I made my decision, texting back a single word: "Why?" The response came almost immediately. "Because what Michael took from Taylor Security is the least of your concerns." This was never about corporate espionage. It was about something much more valuable and much more dangerous. The cryptic response raised the stakes considerably. If accurate, it suggested dimensions to the situation beyond what either Taylor Security or the FBI currently understood. As Mark arrived to take me to Sarah's house, I found myself at a critical juncture. Trust the formal channels and meet with the FBI as planned, or take a risk on this anonymous source who promised the full truth about Michael Wilson. The choice I made would determine not just my understanding of the betrayal I'd suffered, but potentially the security of the technology my family's company had spent decades developing. As we drove through Chicago's nighttime streets, I formulated a plan that would allow me to pursue both paths, though not without significant personal risk. Whatever truth awaited me tomorrow morning, I would face it with clear eyes and full awareness of the stakes involved. Michael Wilson might have deceived me for years, but his betrayal had also stripped away any naivety or hesitation I might once have had. The woman driving to Washington Park tomorrow would be someone he never truly knew, someone prepared to do whatever necessary to protect both herself and the legacy he had tried to steal. Dawn broke over Washington Park in misty layers of gold and pink as I positioned myself near the north entrance. Despite Sarah's protests and my own better judgment, I'd come alone as instructed, though not unprepared. The micro-transmitter embedded in my watch connected directly to Taylor Security's emergency response team, and two of our most experienced security personnel were stationed discreetly nearby. At precisely 6 a.m., a woman approached, slim, mid-50s, with silver-streaked dark hair and the watchful eyes of someone accustomed to surveillance. Not Michael. Not anyone I recognized. "Ms. Taylor," she acknowledged with a slight nod. "Walk with me." "Who are you?" I remained where I stood, unwilling to move until I had some information. "Carmen Vega, Defense Intelligence Agency." She produced identification that looked authentic, though in this situation, that meant little. "I'm handling Michael Wilson's extraction." Extraction? The term carried specific implications in intelligence circles. "You're claiming Michael is an intelligence operative?" Carmen's expression remained carefully neutral. "Not exactly. Michael Wilson, real name Marcus Webb, was recruited by Perseus Group 7 years ago. 3 years ago, he approached us, offering to become a double agent providing intelligence on Perseus operations. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Michael, or Marcus, hadn't just been working for Perseus. He'd also been working for U.S. intelligence agencies. The layers of deception seemed endless. "So my husband is actually a government agent?" I struggled to keep my voice steady. "No. Marcus Webb is a private technology acquisition specialist who agreed to feed us information about Perseus in exchange for immunity regarding certain past activities." Carmen's gaze was direct, unflinching. "His relationship with you was initiated under Perseus directives, but his cooperation with us began shortly after your engagement." My mind raced, processing implications. "The surveillance devices in my home, installed by Perseus operatives, not Marcus. They've been monitoring both of you. They became suspicious of him approximately 6 months ago. The timeline aligned with when Michael began his affair with Olivia. Had that been part of his cover? A deliberate distancing to protect me from whatever was coming? The note he left. Me. He said it wasn't all false. Carmen nodded. Marcus developed genuine feelings for you, which complicated his assignment considerably. When Perseus ordered him to extract specific quantum encryption protocols from Taylor Security, he began working with us to create a modified version, one that appeared valuable but contained critical vulnerabilities that would allow us to track its deployment. And next gen? Theodore Hammond? Hammond discovered the connection between Perseus and NextGen through internal security protocols. He's legitimately concerned about the weaponization potential of your technology, though his proposal for partnership is obviously self-serving. I processed this information, each revelation shifting my understanding of the past 5 years. Where is Marcus now? In protective custody. Perseus discovered his deception. The attack at your penthouse last night wasn't random. It was a retrieval operation targeting him. They hadn't realized he'd already been extracted. I hadn't told her about the surveillance devices being discovered. Either she had separate intelligence sources or she was lying. Why tell me this? Why now? Because you have a decision to make. Carmen checked her watch. In 2 hours, you're meeting with the FBI. They'll present evidence of Marcus Webb's activities, including his relationship with you, framing everything as a foreign-directed technology theft operation. They don't know about his work with us. That's classified at levels beyond their access. You want me to lie to federal investigators? I asked incredulously. We want you to consider national security implications before deciding what to disclose. The modified encryption protocol your husband provided to Perseus contains tracking mechanisms that have allowed us to identify previously unknown terror cells. That operation is still active and has prevented 3 major attacks in the past month alone. The weight of this information settled heavily. Whatever personal betrayal I'd suffered, there were clearly larger stakes involved. I need proof, I stated firmly. Not just your word. Carmen nodded as if she'd expected this. That's fair. She handed me a sealed envelope. Inside is a secure phone. It's set up for one call only. Make it when you're alone and prepared, for answers that can't be unheard. Who will answer? Marcus. He's requested the opportunity to explain himself directly. After that, the choice of what to tell the FBI is yours. She turned to leave, then paused. Whatever you decide, Ms. Taylor, remember that nothing is as simple as it first appears. Not Perseus, not NextGen, and certainly not your husband. As she walked away, I stood holding the envelope, feeling the hard outline of the phone inside. The morning sun now fully illuminated the park, dissolving the last traces of dawn mist. Somewhere in a secure location, the man I knew as Michael Wilson was waiting to explain 5 years of deception, to justify betrayals both personal and professional. Would his explanation matter? Could any revelation undo the violation of trust? The surveillance, the calculated targeting of my family's company? Yet, if Carmen's claims were true, the implications extended far beyond my marriage or even Taylor Security. I checked my watch, 6:25 a.m. The FBI meeting was at 8. I had less than 2 hours to hear Michael's explanation, evaluate its veracity, and decide how much of the truth to share with federal investigators. Whatever choice I made would have cascading consequences for national security operations, for Taylor Security's technology, and for my own ability to trust again. Taking a deep breath, I opened the envelope and removed the phone, my finger hovering over the single button that would connect me to the man who had both loved and betrayed me. In that moment of hesitation, I realized that regardless of what Michael or Marcus might say, I had already taken the most important step. I had survived his betrayal and emerged stronger, more determined, and unwilling to be manipulated further. I pressed the button. Whatever truth awaited on the other end of this call, I would face it with clear eyes and an open mind, but never again with blind trust. Emma, his voice came through immediately. Thank you for calling. You have 10 minutes, I replied, coolly. Make them count. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.